Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Path here from Man with Purpose. Today I have Fin. So Fin is a movement and lifestyle coach, also a men's work facilitator, based out of Perth, Australia. Fin, thanks very much for
Yes,
doing
welcome.
this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure. Sorry,
Likewise,
just out,
likewise.
outside, like the wind. I'll try to kind of hide the wind off as much as possible in this beautiful Perth
Oh man,
afternoon.
yes. No worries, brother. No worries.
Mm.
Let's maybe take a couple of deep breaths and just kind of feel in what's actually present for you at the moment.
Yeah, it's good.
Hmm. Um, what's present for you at the moment, brother?
Yeah, just feeling a lot of gratitude at the minute. It's been a really awesome week for myself. Just came off running a workshop at an awesome retreat last weekend, and yeah, this week has been wicked. Some massive wins for clients and stuff like that, as well as just some really good things happening back at home with my fam, with the girls and stuff like that as well. And just feeling really lots of gratitude, being able to sit in the beautiful Perth sun while speaking to you.
Likewise. Wow, dude. Yeah, I'm feeling also a lot of gratitude, for doing this, for doing this interview, but also just being present right now and really doing what I really want to do, what I really love to do. Um,
Yeah.
Man, aren't you guys in, just to kind of dive in a little bit, aren't you guys in the lockdown right now? What's kind of the regulations in Perth right now?
It's one of the beauties about being the most isolated city in the world. Perth, like we've been in a bit of a bubble, so yeah, like we've kind of got away with not a lot happening with around the COVID and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
there was big restrictions in at the start for a while, but like it was we were blessed that it was only short enough lived. And for ourselves, it's pretty much back to normal now.
Mm,
It's been like that for quite a while. So
mm.
compared to the family back home in Ireland who are back in lockdown, and a few friends over in Melbourne and stuff like that, like who are like, it's like, yeah, we're pretty blessed here in Perth, but yeah,
Wow.
one of the joys about being so isolated.
Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
people listening or watching this right now, regardless of the medium, are gonna be like, "Wow!" Like I probably need to head to Perth straight away. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've been checking some of your stories on Instagram and kind of seeing that people move freely there. There's plenty of nature, and it just
Mm.
looks awesome, dude. Like that's amazing. Like it's something that I don't know, maybe people take it for granted, but right now I think people cherish it even more, perhaps.
Yeah,
Mm.
and that was it. Like coming from Ireland, like I grew up in rural Ireland, so it was always like loved like big expansiveness back out in nature and stuff. Like that was what I grew up in. And when we came over to Australia, like spent the first bit of time living in Sydney, and that was my first proper time living in a big busy city.
Mm.
But during that time, like we came over to Perth for a holiday to visit a few friends, and like myself and partner, like we just absolutely fell in love with it. So we knew like once we were doing like a big road trip around Australia, like Perth was going to be your final destination. And we had planned to stay in Australia for like a year, maybe 2 years max, and that was about 9 years ago.
Wow. Okay, 2011.
Yeah, yeah,
Dude, wow. So maybe talk us a little bit through your story. You're originally from Ireland.
yeah.
What was it like growing up there? What were you like a kid? You know.
Yeah, so for myself, like I grew up, as I said, like grew up in rural Ireland. So coming from like a very traditional Irish background. So like my father was a farmer, my mother was a nurse. It's like a very common combination of
Mm,
in a household. And like I grew up like the youngest of three boys. And yeah, like I think for myself, like I always, it's been one of the biggest things. Like I always felt like being the youngest, I was a lot more kind of quiet and just into my own space and more sensitive and stuff like that. I never felt like I really fully fitted in. More of that kind of like alpha man, macho kind of man, sort of like upbringing and stuff. So like that always kind of like felt like I was a bit of an outsider growing up. And it wasn't until I moved away to uni that like I actually felt like I was able to like fully step into my own skin and start kind of like being fully authentically me, because yeah, like moved away, like was living away from home and stuff like that, and just yeah, created a really healthy friendship circle, and just yeah, was able to like really step into my truth with that. And that was the
Mm,
first big kind of shift within me to kind of see is like, oh, like it's like how some of the conditioning that we are brought up with, how that has such an effect on our personalities and what we perceive ourselves and what we think we are.
mm,
um yeah, so like, and then just it's been one of the big things has been part of my journey is just working and healing from a lot of that, a lot of the stuff that I was kind of growing up with, and a lot of the like the wounds where I was like holding myself small and just not like feeling a lot of this like lack mentality around being like a yeah, more of a sensitive guy who was more in touch with his emotions and didn't really know how to express themselves in a healthy manner. So just
yeah.
yeah, like what most young guys do is just hide it all down with booze and drugs, because it was the
Mm,
only way you knew how to express yourself, or like not express yourself as such. You just yeah. So like
yeah.
that was a big part of my life, and a big part of my journey was how I relied heavily on alcohol to numb a lot of the feelings and a lot of the sensations that I wasn't able to explain.
Mm,
And like it wasn't until like I met my partner, like now wife, that I just started to actually realize that that wasn't probably the most healthy thing to do.
hmm,
And yeah, like she started me off on more of kind of connecting into more of a spiritual path and more of a deeper meaning to life. And yeah, it's been
yeah.
a massive roller coaster for the last like 12 years with her.
Wow. You know,
Yeah.
in every kind of story where there's like a turnaround, 180-degree turnaround, there's whenever I'm speaking to a guy, 9 times out of 10, it's a partner that just came to their life and just kind of changed everything.
Mm,
um,
yeah.
hmm,
And like that was for me, like I was, yeah, like I was very much kind of live for the weekend sort of thing. Like I studied as a sports physio, and like was working with a lot of athletes and sports teams and stuff like that. When I qualified, and like loved what I'd done, was really good at what I'd done, but then just suppressed everything down for like the weekend and like partied up a lot and stuff like that, because I didn't really
mm,
know that's all what I knew. But like when I met my partner, like she was the one that just started like she was into a lot of kind of like the aspects of spirituality and different teachings and stuff, and I just kind of like amused her and thought it was a bit very woo woo at the start. But yeah, the
mhm,
more I kind of see, the more I seen her and see what the effects that it was having on her, and then started just being open to experiencing it. Like it just had some massive shifts within myself, and yeah,
mm,
just had some really powerful experiences for myself. Getting a reading from like one of her teachers that just literally cracked me right open.
mhm.
That was the big kind of catalyst for me. Is like, right, I actually need to like give this some credit, and started really changing my perspective of yeah, like how I started looking at life and what I wanted to do for myself.
Mm, mm. I also want to rewind a little bit back because in the beginning you said something about playing small. And this is something that
Mm,
I can relate to because I've been kind of having these, negative thoughts that I'm not enough or I don't deserve X, Y, Z. And I speak to quite a
mm,
lot of men. And at first, obviously, they don't want to admit that. But as we go deeper, whether it's in a men's circle or in a retreat, it does come up. It's almost like a universal thing for a lot of them. Can
yeah,
you can
yeah,
you speak a little bit about how you came to that realization and also how you went out of that limiting belief or toxic belief?
yeah, yeah. Like that was such a massive one for me in my journey. Like it's when I started off kind of more on the kind of path of like trying to figure out who I was, and like I followed a lot more of that, like how I kind of relate to it now and look at it now is like spent so many years going down more of the light and love, the spirituality side of things, and trying to like bring a lot more of like the positivity in, and like a lot of like the power of now and law of attraction and all of that side of spirituality to try to figure out what was going on, because I knew there were so many blockages within myself, and I was holding myself back and keeping myself small, but I never really knew why. And the more I started delving deeper into a lot of them practices, like it shifted a lot of the stuff in the surface level, but I always knew there was something deeper, but I could never get to the bottom with.
Mm,
And that was what kind of drove me towards diving deeper into more specific men's work, because that was where I was first introduced like a lot more of the Carl Jung style of philosophy, and like doing a lot more of the shadow work and looking at our darkness, looking at that like the shadow sides of ourselves and delving deeper into that. That was when I had a massive like game-changing, eye-opening experience around all of that, because you're like, oh, fuck, this is the stuff that a lot of people don't do. Like we
Mm.
look for the light, we want to focus on the good, we want to focus on the positivity, but we don't actually look at a lot of that hurt, a lot of that pain, like our
Mm.
anger, or frustration, or shame, or guilt, and looking into the deeper, darker side. But as I surrendered into that and dived more and more into that, that's where I uncovered a lot of the truths around why I was playing it small, why I didn't have the belief in myself, and like a lot of the stories that I was creating to feed that story and feed that belief with it. And yeah, like it was a big process uncovering a lot of that, and like it took
Mm.
quite a while digging into it. But yeah, it's not easy, but it's so worth it when you come out the other side.
Nice, nice, brother, man. Um, I'm very glad that you're bringing this up because people, I think especially men, I think just people in general, whenever they get into this kind of personal development, spiritual realm, they think everything is about just positivity and happy, happy, clappy, clappy type of experiences, and
Yeah.
and that's not the case, right? You have to really enter deep into the cave and really, as Joseph Campbell says,
Mm,
right? The treasure to seek is in there, in that cave. Can you maybe,
yeah.
for people who are uninitiated, let's let's put it this way, can you explain a little bit about what is shadow work
Yeah.
for them?
The thing that always like did it, the quote that opened me up the most to it was it's like Carl Jung's is like a tree's leaves can't touch heavens unless its roots touch hell. And it's like
Mm.
you can like it's like you can experience pure bliss unless you know the depths of darkness as well. Like where so many people are striving for so much of this happiness, so much of this positivity, but they're not willing to drop into the darkness. They're afraid of the dark emotions, the fears that come up. They're afraid of when they react in these really unhealthy, wounded aspects of themselves, when they show up as the wounded masculine or wounded feminine within themselves, and that scares the shit out of them. And that's where so many people turn to like drugs and alcohol and different stuff, because that numbs them out from actually experiencing a lot of them sensations. But
Mm.
it's when we actually allow us to shine light on our shadows and like ask ourselves like, why is there shadow there? Like what is coming up? Where are we wounded? Where are we hurt? um that has caused us to fall into these shadows of ourselves, fall into these dark sides of ourselves, and like act in these ways. Like that's where a lot of like our actual healing can really come from.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know for me is like so much of my shadow stuff was coming from like I had a lot of I, I never knew how to express anger, but I held a lot of anger
Mm.
and frustration within myself. So like if stuff was coming up really heavy for me, like I would just suppress everything down and just push everything down. And as I pushed everything down, it would push people away from me. And like that was the only way I knew how to deal with my shit. But that was because I didn't realize there was a lot of suppressed anger there. And like it wasn't
Mm.
until I actually looked into it, it's like where in my life, has that come from? Where from a childhood, from a past has a lot of that come from? And why is that there? And what can I do to move through that? And like actually see the gifts that have come from that. So then I'm able to start moving through that and changing how I respond in them
Mm.
situations. And that was like a massive, like, yeah, like so much lessons, but like that was like the really hard work. That's where it's really tough delving into a lot of our pain to uncover a lot of our actual truths within that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And I think listening to you, I'm kind of reflecting on my own journey with anger. It's been a constant. It's been very kind of suppressed, bottled up, and really not really having a healthy way to actually express this because it's such a big energy that
Mm,
it's very difficult to channel it properly, right? Obviously in the
yeah.
gym, and I started doing jiu-jitsu and previously a little bit of boxing and kickboxing, but other than that, it's been very difficult for me to express it. And I
Yeah.
think maybe I'm overgeneralizing here, but I think a lot of men actually dealing with something similar, even though maybe they don't want to admit that it's anger and maybe they're afraid. And do you think that I think there is a stigma? I'm actually curious to hear your perspective on this as well. Do you think there is a stigma with anger being like a labeled as a bad feeling? And
Oh, definitely,
mm,
definitely. Like as you're speaking there, like that was one of the things. Like so many of us are afraid of anger because when we look at anger, we only see the really unhealthy projections of that anger. Like straight away, like if you think of anger, what comes to mind? Like you think of like real aggression, like real that fight, like
Rage.
that hurt, that rage, that hurt that comes with it. That's where it's like an uncontrollable anger. And
Mm-hmm.
if you don't accept that anger is present in your body, if you don't see that and be able to kind of work with the anger within your body, it's got to come out in some shape or form, be it in fits of rage or passive aggressiveness, or you completely push it down to push everyone away. Like it's one of them things. Like if we don't deal with our shadows there then and there how they are, they're going to come out in some shape or form to hurt us or hurt the people closest to us in different ways. So like it's like, yeah, like it's so much of it is like if we have like a really unhealthy or if we're really fearsome of anger, it's like looking, it's like why? It's like what is your experiences? What is your story around anger? And like why are you afraid of it? Rather than getting that anger, like if we deal with anger in a really healthy way, we can channel that into so much creativity and so much potential for ourselves as well, because we are taking control of it. We are leading with that, and like we're harnessing that for the greater good, rather than allowing that just to pop out because we're not able to regulate it.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually speaking to a guy I'm working with right now. His name is Michael Gay, and he's kind of saying that, you know, for really to create anything, you really need access to this primal anger energy, but you need to obviously hone it and control it rather than just kind of letting it loose and, you know, kind of showing the shadow side of what people are normally probably accustomed to when they hear the word anger, and they, you know, they imagine people, men yelling at each other, or, you know, getting physical, etc., etc. Wow. And how normally would you channel that? Would it be in a group setting? Would it be in a one-to-one environment? If people were kind of listening, thinking, oh shit, like maybe I have something in this and I'm curious to kind of explore it, how would someone do something, you know, because it's quite a big thing, right? Where would they start?
Yeah, it's like with that sort of stuff, it's different for everyone with it. But like for me personally, the way I found like I worked with it is like because I was always very fearful of anger. I was like, oh, I'm not an angry person. It's like I'm all good. I'm nice and chill. But it's like when
Everybody
it was
says
like,
that.
yeah, I was like, actually, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of frustration that builds up. That's my default. Is when stuff comes up, when I feel that, it's like I push it all down. So like for me, it's like I went through a period. I was like, right, I actually need to start working with this and shedding some light onto that. So I started creating like a practice of, like, it's just that primal screaming, that primal activation of it, to allow myself to actually tap into that in a safe space. So for me, like some of that would include, like if I felt that anger coming up, like instead of pushing it down and suppressing it, is like I'd go down to the room and I would allow that anger to come out. So it's like I'd tap into that primal energy in myself. I could put on some like real heavy music, like be it like real like Nordic Viking kind of like that primal music.
Primal,
Just
yeah.
yeah, it gets into you, and like as soon as you'd feel that coming up, just like allow myself to breathe with that, allow myself to feel that energy coming up and feel the fucking power behind that. But then would allow myself to express that. So like with that, it might be like literally like getting a pillow and like screaming and beating into a pillow. Like however that might be, is like literally just allowing yourself to like release all of that out of your body, like get that out of your physical container, and like get that out of yourselves to allow all of that out. Like for me, like a lot of it was like I had a lot of issues around speaking the truth, so like the word was closed off through my throat. So it was like would be like screaming into like a pillow, like another one for like to open to release it from that way. Like be in the water a lot. So anytime I'd feel frustration, I'd get down to the water, and like anytime I could literally dive under the waves and like just let the biggest roar out in the waves. Just
Wow.
it was
Okay.
just a control way of just releasing and expressing that. But as you do that more, it's allowing you to actually feel that build up, but then allow that to move through you a lot rather than holding it in. Like rather than holding it into your physical, because if you hold it in, it's going to either manifest in physical pain, physical tension, or it's going to manifest in you projecting it on someone around you in an unhealthy way.
Wow. I'm very glad that you're bringing this up. You mentioned the physical container, and obviously you're a movement coach as well. Talk a little bit
Yeah.
about the connection with all of the things that we, discussed so far, and the actual body, how that manifests. Because I've started maybe 6 or 7 months ago getting more and more into bioenergetics and actually working with the body and all these kind of body therapies. And it's been so so effective. I mean, I've done NLP and all these other coaching practices, but there's something special when you feel the body. Maybe talk a little bit more from your perspective as well.
Like that was probably one of the biggest aspects that got me relating into it from my background, is like working with the physical body, like as a physio, and like working with movement. Like I qualified just before like the recession hit Ireland, so I was like I was early 20s when it just qualified. The recession hit, so there was a lot of people who were in a lot of pain from like the mental and emotional heaviness and trauma that was happening in that time, of like people losing their houses, under a lot of financial burden. There was a lot, like really high levels of suicide in Ireland at that time. So like when I was like just young, fresh out of college and stuff like that, like people were coming to me with injuries, but by the time they would feel it was okay to invest in themselves to try to get an injury fixed, they were thinking as like their injuries was just a physical injury, where in a matter of fact, it was actually so much of it was this pent up tension and heaviness and energies of it. And like I started to see that really, really early on. Like, and I was always very like tapped in and tuned in to being able to read that, even when I didn't understand what it was. And then like when we moved over to Perth, like that just went tenfold. Like I started looking more into other therapies and like combining like my knowledge of the physical body with more of the energetic awareness, and being able to like marry the two of them together and just intuitively work with that, because I could see that where people were holding their pain, where people had restrictions within their movement, so much of that linked into where they were holding like different emotional blocks or different blockages with the flow of energy through their body. Like I was just really, really blessed to have some amazing mentors who were able to guide me into unlocking a lot of that awareness for myself. And yeah, like that just kind of rolled on over the years. But then when I got into more of the coaching side of things and more of that, like so much of the stuff that I do is like we can learn all of this work through our logic mind, but if we're not processing it through our body, we're missing such a big piece of the puzzle. Because it's like that's what embodiment is at the end of the day. Is like so many of us, like we go through these big massive breakthroughs, these big experiences, but if we're not allowing ourselves to filter that through our nervous system, through our body, like we're still holding on to so much of that pain, so much of that trauma that it is. And like as you said, delving deeper into looking at the bioenergetics, but looking at like how like different emotions and different things are all stored in different parts of our body, and like just understanding that awareness of it, it's just, it opens up so many pathways of how much we can start unlocking. And yeah, it's amazing to see.
Yeah, that's a journey in and of itself. Like you could spend, I mean, you've been on this path for nearly 10 years now. You know the benefits, but for people that are listening, Michael also says that, Michael, the guy that I'm working with, he says that normally when a trauma happens or something very intense happens, and usually occurs in parts of the body parts in the brain rather, where there is no language. So to really effectively process something like this, you really need to employ the body and all these kind of therapies rather than just purely speaking, which again, to some extent, maybe it does have some merit, but it's a totally different feeling when you, like you said, so you start screaming, you get into this kind of primal mode where you feel the body and channel it through that.
And that's when you look at more of that somatic release and stuff like that, like if you've ever experienced or seen any of them therapy releases, like they're so powerful, being able to work through it in that way. Like, and like I've worked with people and I've like been part of like retreats and different things where like in one experience of doing a somatic release where you're able to release it from every cell of your body through that physical, like that's stuff that people have been trying to like heal in themselves for like years and years of talk therapy. Like, and that's not to that's not to push down talk therapy, because that is such an important role
of
for
course.
so many people as well. But that's where like it's important to like look at the alternatives and marry different things together and find what works for you. But yeah, like it's being able to like work with the physical body, and it's so powerful. And I find for men especially, it's like so many men are completely detached from their body, where they're just completely caught up in that analytical mind.
Mm.
And like when they're trying to delve into this personal development work and doing the men's work on themselves, they're trying to literally analyze and analytically process the way out of all of these pains and traumas and discomforts and all of that stuff. And it's not going to fly. It's like until you are able to decipher that through your physical body and through your energetic body, that's where you're going to be able to start making the big shifts and changes.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
You did say somatic releases, and this is something that I've been a part of on a few occasions. It's very difficult to kind of describe it with words, and obviously you cannot do it do it justice by, again, like you said, being logical. If people hear somatic releases, how would you describe it in a kind of in a very simple terms? Obviously, it's something that there is a lot more value being there and actually experiencing than purely entertaining it logically.
Yeah. Like again, it just goes back to what we were speaking into, how like every emotion, every pain, every trauma, all of them different things are stored in their cellular memory. They're stored in their physical body, in their cellular memory. Even going back as far as like lots of like ancestral trauma, all the stuff that has happened through your ancestral lines, all of them things are stored in their DNA. Like, so even like if it's something that, like, if you believe it or not, is like how like so much of our traumas, our wounds, all of them things, like we could heal everything from this lifetime, but there's got to be stuff that has come through the conditioning from our past that is just within us. Like you look at different races, you look at different people. For myself, like I work with a lot of Irish people here in Australia, and like a lot of like people that I have worked with always come to me and ask us like, why have so many like Irish men got the similar issues? And I was like, when you look at what happened in their past, how Irish people like were so suppressed for so long, like through the famine, through like all of the troubles, through the civil wars, through all of that stuff, there's so much of that is already ingrained in their systems. So like, yeah, we're going through and processing stuff in this lifetime, but there's stuff that is so ingrained in them from how the parents were treated from their grandparents, and so forth, so on and so forth down that. And
Yes.
like with that sort of stuff, that's where to tap into that and being able to release that is like, that's where we need to start working through a lot more of embodiment practices to actually start connecting into our body, to start shifting that up and releasing that. And like as somatic therapy has different releases, like there's so many different avenues you can do it, but for me, like what I kind of focus on is teaching people how to just slowly start reconnecting back and feeling in their body, allowing them to be present in their body, and allowing them to find safety and comfort within their body. Because again, a lot of times, like we don't feel safe, we don't feel comfort in our body because like we've got so many stuff that's holding us back, where we just feel scared, where we don't feel that. So that's where like you marry in that aspects of the masculine and feminine dynamics, is like where the masculine energy is like they want to feel safe, they want to like be secured and have all of this like physical practice, be strong within it. But whereas the feminine dynamic, they just want to feel safe, feel held, feel loved, feel supported within that. So if you are a man that's just stuck in your head but you're not in your body, is like your feminine is not going to feel safe. You're not going to be able to feel vulnerable. You're not going to be able to express your emotion. You're not going to be able to tap into that side of it. So by allowing males to like start dropping into their body, that's allowing them to start evoke a lot more of that feminine energy within themselves, which is super healing in itself. And that has that crossover with allowing them to let down a lot of the barriers within themselves to uncover what needs to be uncovered.
Wow. Dude, there's so much to unpack in what you said. Like, yeah, I think people that are listening probably need to rewind or replay this a couple of times. I'm very glad that you're bringing the whole notion of this kind of cross-generational wounds that you've been carrying, because I really believe, as I'm right now doing on my own journey, that I'm not only healing myself and also past generations, but I'm also doing work for future generations as well. They don't have to kind of see me erupting like maybe my father did or people around me. So I think it's really, and that's probably why it's so difficult, right? Because this is not like just kind of happened to you right now. This has been ongoing for multiple generations. People don't really maybe think about this in that way, I think.
And that's the thing with it, like that's where I find is like when we start off on this path, like we start and just focus on ourselves. Like, whereas if you're someone that's like new to this work and starting to think it's like, all right, you need to heal yourself and all the stuff in your past, you're like,
That's
where
it,
do I
done.
start? But like, it's just like, just focus on you. And as you focus on you, and as you're able to expand your consciousness and your awareness and that love and acceptance and everything of yourself, like that's where you're going to be able to start working back more so. Because like, it's one of the things when I start working with people who are new to this work, they're
Mm,
like, when do I get to the point that I don't have to do it? And it's just like, that's where I'm like, you're at a really pivotal point now, because you see the importance of this. But it's like,
mm,
you look at any of the greatest mentors, the greatest people, it's like they're not sitting back relaxing. Like any of the biggest mentors, the biggest people who are doing this work and who've been on this path, is like they do more of this work than any of us,
mm,
because they know that it's like we're constantly going through levels and upgrades and everything with that. But then as you do that, that's where you're able to start going back and clearing a lot more of them, all the deeper rooted seated stuff that's from the ancestral lineage. But it was,
mm.
yeah, like, and this is something like it's been very big for myself this year, is like tapping back into more of that like ancestral line and doing a lot of research into like where I came from through like the Celtic Ireland and even like the Tuatha and stuff like that, like who were there before the Celts came to Ireland, and starting to just bring more of an understanding and awareness into that for myself. But also
Mm,
like, because we've got two young daughters and we live in Australia, and we're like, we want to know what our heritage is, we want to be able to connect to that. But
mhm,
it's like, for us, like it's really important for us to have like one foot deeply rooted in where we came from, but the other foot deeply rooted in where we are here now. So like, we
mm,
connect with like the indigenous of the land here in Australia, and like pay reverence and homage to a lot of their customs and their healings and their traditions. But we also, this year, we've been putting a big effort into like starting to celebrate and work off the Celtic calendar year, and
mhm.
celebrating a lot of them old traditions and stuff like that for ourselves, but as well as for the girls. And as we do
Wow.
that, it allows us to start bringing up a lot of, clearing a lot of these old stories and these old awarenesses that has been filtered through the generations from there as well.
Mhm. Wow, wow, that's beautiful, man. And you're also doing it whilst the children are there, right? So they kind of know exactly,
Mm,
their past, and also where they came from, and also what's it like being in Australia. Wow, that's
yeah.
beautiful. Wow. Um, you mentioned you had a mentor as you were kind of going through your own journey. How did you
Mm.
get into men's work? Because that's kind of a question that sometimes I do get. Like, what is men's work? How did you get into that in the first place? What was that
Yeah.
like for you?
So for myself, like the first main mentor that I had was me more so like learning how to marry between more of like the old traditional style of therapy that I was using, more of like working with the physical body and starting to bring in a lot of the energetic and the personal development work into it as well, and being able to marry the two of them together. But as I was doing that more, and as I started doing a lot more work for myself, I realized like as I evolved, so did the work that I was doing. It was like I got
Mm,
to a point where it's like, I'm not like, I don't want to be able to just bring people through to this level of awareness of themselves when I know that there's another 5 steps after that. So like as I started evolving myself, then that's where I started working and guiding more and more people through that. And just over the years, that as I started doing a lot more men's work for me personally, I was invited into that space to bring what I do into that space and bring more of the breath work and the embodiment and the movement side of things into that space,
mm,
and like
mm,
start working in there and start exploring that. But then as I was doing that, that allowed me to clear, as we were speaking into at the start, a lot of my old stories about not being good enough, like not being able to like fully step into my truth and my power and stuff like that. Like a couple of years ago, I went through like a big shift and a breakthrough for myself around a lot of that. And like literally, as soon as I let go of a lot of that, that just opened up the whole pathways to like, why have I been playing it so small? It's like, this is what I'm here to do. I always like, I had a thing to my wife who was always said, it's like, I love what I'm doing, but this isn't it. But I didn't know what
wow.
it was. But like deep down it did, but I just didn't believe I was good enough to do it, because that was the
Mm,
story I was telling myself. Whereas everyone else was around me was telling me, it's like, this is what you need to be doing. But it wasn't until I like let go of a lot of that old stories from myself and like stepped into and actually owned what it was that I was here to do, that's when just everything just completely shifted. And that's what
mm,
allowed me to step into working more so with the network. And like for me, like it was like so called to this because I knew from my own experiences like what it felt like to know that you're not living up to your full potential, know that you're not being your best self for you as well as for your family. Like so much of me and like my biggest values is my wife and my daughters, and it's like I know I wasn't living into my fullest for them. And if I'm able to help other fathers and other men clear away a lot of their shit so they can step into their truth, their power for themselves and for their families around them, and it's like that's what I'm here to do.
Wow, that's beautiful, man. I think there is something special about becoming a father, and I've interviewed some of the guests. I mean, I'm not there yet, being a father, but it's something that definitely I'd like to do. And I think having, I wouldn't even call it motivation, having something sacred as a family and using that to really, I mean, using that as motivation, if you will, or to kind of a leverage to say, look, I'm, calling on my shit. Like I'm really not stepping up into truth in my calling, whatever, you want to label it as.
Yeah.
That must be serving as a really strong, I'd say, a really strong why for you to really get to the next level.
Yeah, and that's the biggest one. Like it's so true with that. Is like when I became a father, it was like, the way I explain it's like just something clicked inside me. So I looked at the world completely different. As soon as I held my daughter, I was just like I don't know what it was. It's just like the next day when I walked out of the house, I just looked at the whole world completely differently.
Wow.
And it was just like okay, and like it was like when my daughter was about 1.5, that's where I started delving deeper into my own healing and went through like a dark night of the soul for about a year or so, and like really went through a deep process of kind of like shedding a lot of them layers because I could see when I was playing when I was living in that old self, it was like I wasn't being my full self for me and for my daughter and for my wife. So it was like as I knew that there wasn't a future in me continuing on that path, and something had to drastically change. And it was shit that it had to get to like a really dark point for that to change. But that's what happened for me. But that allowed me to like make such a massive dramatic 360 shift with it. And then from there, like that just gives me the fire to continue in this because I don't want other men have to go through that. I don't want other men to be in them places where they feel completely lost, but yet you have to provide for your family, and you don't know you don't know where to turn, you don't know what to do, and like yeah, like that was what was like yeah, that was what like such a big shift and a big motivation for me was.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're working with a lot of men, both on retreats and probably one-to-one, probably and women as well, I suppose. Specifically for the men, what are some common things that they do bring to the table? If let's say they are open to do a little bit of healing, going deeper into themselves, what are some of the common things that they carry with them? The wounds, let's start with the wounds.
Like I think a bigger thing is that like the common threads that you keep seeing is just that lack of confidence in themselves, that lack of belief and self-worth in themselves, and how they have created these stories to constantly feed that. And like it's wondering, it's peeling back the layers to understand. It's like, right, where does that stem from? Like where did you lose your confidence? Where did you lose your belief in yourself? And what can we do to start like creating like a new life for you, a new way for you to look at the world around you, to start rewriting your scripts, rewriting the stories around all of that. And like that's probably one of the biggest ones that I see showing up over and over and over again.
Wow.
And like with that, like that shows very differently for a lot of different people. But
yeah,
like when you strip a lot of it back, you can see like that's a lot of the big core the core wounds that are holding back, and then from that can be coming from so many different places. That can be coming from like sexual abuse when you're younger. It can be coming from like really toxic relationships, like with the parents or brothers, or different stuff like that. Like it can come from so many different places, but like that's how it manifests within their core beliefs around themselves that hold them back.
Yeah. Fuck, man. Life's difficult. Everybody that says different is, there's so many things,
Yeah.
right, that people wouldn't even,
Mm.
they would probably be afraid to admit to themselves, let alone be willing to step into this
Mm.
place where they start, sharing it with other
Mm.
people. Wow. I think,
But like one of like with yes, like with that one, like just kind of one of the biggest things that I feel that needs to be talked into as well is because men have been so ingrained into not being able to tap into their emotions, not being able to express themselves and kind of speak into what's going on for themselves. Like guaranteed most men think they're the only person that's going through a lot of what they're going through. And
hmm,
it's one of the things like I really like I do a lot of intentional work around when I'm doing like group programs and stuff like that with people. Like if I see someone is so caught in the story thinking it's like I'm the only person that's going through this, everything's really hard. That's where it's like literally ask everyone around. It's like who else has felt that at some stage in your life? And straight away you see 90% of the hands popping up. And as soon as that
shit.
happens, you see the person going, it's like, oh fuck, it's not just me. And like
Yeah,
that in itself, like and like it's one of the things that in itself is such a shift for people to see that like we only see the external shell of what's going on for people.
hmm,
And the more like it's like everyone has their own demons that they're working through. Just some people are better at wearing masks than others.
hmm. Yeah, I like what you said about wearing masks. I'm a firm believer, having been through this myself, that a lot of men actually suffer in silence, right?
Mm,
they wouldn't go and they wouldn't open up. They wouldn't start talking because, oh, this is gay, or I'm just complaining, or,
yeah.
one of the previous guests said, oh, a bunch of men coming together to complain about their wives, which is very, very humorous way of looking at it, but it has nothing to do with. I mean, that could probably be on a surface level, but much deeper is something
mm,
a lot
mm,
more deeper that they're trying to kind of work through. Hmm.
yeah. And that's the thing is like because most men are just aware of like when you're hanging out with other men, it's just surface level conversations.
Yeah.
Not a lot of men have like really close guys who they can have them deep and meaningful and open conversations. Whereas, like a lot of it is like you just sit around having a few pints and talk surface level stuff, and that's what it
Yes.
is. Whereas
Yeah.
when you're in a space like in a sacred space where men are able to like drop in and feel really safe and feel really held to be able to express, like there's such a healing comes from that collective energy. And like as one
Mm.
person is going through an experience and as one person is doing that, like that is having such a profound healing effect on every other man that is in that space.
Yeah. Yeah, I hold regular men's circles, and every single time I say, men's work is the medicine, because it really does feel like a medicine
Mm,
afterwards. Like you've left so many things behind or on the table, and it's been okay. It's a safe space. You're not getting judged. Um,
yeah.
I used to live in London for about, I don't know, 8 or 9 years, and I could see
Mm,
this almost like I mean, it is a pattern. Like everybody is waiting for 9 to 5 to finish, for Friday to come in, to go to the pub, have a few pints. And I'm not sure if it's a typical English thing, and again, I'm probably stereotyping and overgeneralizing here, but I've heard this from other men which I've been with in circles, in retreats. There's notion to kind of really keep things very light, right, and kind of laugh things off a little bit, which I'm not too sure
mm,
if it's only men there, but a lot of men tend to kind of downplay this. Oh, it's okay, and kind of start laughing about it, and you can
yeah.
almost sense there is a lot of resistance going into something deeper there.
Yeah. And that was the thing. Like for me myself, that was a big part of my I'm gonna say like unlearning. Um
Mm,
because like I was like that. I was like brought up in Ireland where you have like close friendships and stuff like that. But like no matter how close I was with my friends, I never told them what was actually going on.
wow.
And like as I like when I started to be a lot more vocal on social media to share more of my story, like that triggered so many people from especially from back home, like in my family and friends and stuff like that because they're like, oh, like you when you showed up, you're always in a good place, like you're always really happy and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, because like I was really good at wearing masks. I was really good at like putting on that surface level, but I never felt safe enough to even admit it to myself. Never mind being able to speak it out. So like one of
Mm.
like a massive healing process for me was being able to feel confident enough to start sharing more of my journey. Like, and I've talked into a lot of stuff on different posts and different lives over the years about like when I like dealt like with real bad anxiety, when I had panic attacks, when I was like in like really dark places and stuff like that. And for me, the reason I do that is because if that can help one person, give one person permission to see that it is okay, then I don't care if that's pissing off $100 people, because that's helping one person. Because that was me. I never seen that anywhere around me. I could never see any men being able to connect and openly speak into what was going on, what was closest to
Mm.
their heart. So like, when I didn't think it existed, I was like, oh, there must just be something fundamentally wrong with me.
Wow.
But the more we're actually able to be open and speaking about this, that's giving more and more men permission to be able to do the same.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that's what such an important part of this work is being able to speak and share with people, to create these safe spaces to open up.
Mm.
And like, and that's like, it doesn't matter is like what you do for your job. It doesn't matter how good your relationships and stuff like that is. Like, a lot of us can still have stuff that is just really heavy on our heart that we need to just express. Like,
Yeah.
even myself, like where I am now, I'm in the best place that I've ever been. But that doesn't mean like I need to sit down and like have times where like I'm able to talk into stuff and like work through lots of stuff,
Yeah.
because it always happens, it always comes up. Like, life is like a roller coaster. We comes in these peaks and troughs, but the
Mm.
more we have a really healthy support network around us to navigate that and realize we don't have to be a lone wolf anymore, like, that's where the magic happens.
Mm. Oh, that's really well put. Especially the thing that you said about people getting triggered. I think they kind of start again coming back to the shadow where they really start projecting things onto you because maybe they are because of their inability
Mm,
to express it, or maybe there's a lot of
yeah,
resistance there. So especially when you
yeah,
start changing people's attitude, I've noticed from personal life also begins to change a little bit
mm.
as well. Like, oh, the old spells are not working on you anymore, so it's a little bit like, what am I
Yeah,
like? Wow.
yeah. And
Hmm.
that's it. Like, people, like, yeah, like, they can just get challenged by that. They're like, oh, like, you were I thought this was my picture of you, and this is my image and my thing of you, but
Yeah.
that shifted. So then I was like, I don't, oh, that feels threatened. Or like, you're starting to look into doing this deeper inquiry about yourself and understand yourself. It's like that, like, subconsciously or consciously, that can be evoking them to start looking and questioning things in their own life, like whether they
Hmm.
like it or not. And that's where it can come into that aspect of projecting their fears and projecting their insecurities and stuff like that across,
Yeah.
because they're not willing to look into that themselves. But
Yeah.
and like with that, like, it's like that's them on their own journey. It's like, because
Hmm.
like at the end of the day, it's like, when I started doing this, I was like, oh, everyone needs to be doing this. And I was like, people need to come to it whenever they're ready, because we're all on our own
Hmm.
individual journey. And
That's
like,
a very good point.
we all work with that level of consciousness and awareness that we are at.
Hmm. That's a very good point, man. I've been a little bit of the school that every man should do men's work because I maybe it's through my
Hmm.
idealistic lens of the world. But you're absolutely right, and this is what other guests have said also. It's really not necessarily for everyone, which I kind of disagree with, but it's really when they're ready. It's very
Yeah.
difficult to push someone into something like this because it's such a it could be heavy, it could be a little bit more humoristic as well. But once you get into doing the actual work, it could be
Yeah.
nurturing, it could be scary, it could be a lot of things are
Mm,
gonna pop up for you. So it's
mm.
yeah, it's not like a walk in the park, put it this way.
Yeah. And that's the thing, and like, and that's one of the beauties with it at the, like, over this last year, like, I've seen like a massive shift in it, where there's more and more men stepping into this sort of work. So that means
Mm,
like it's going to be more attainable to reach out with different people, because like, I know for ourselves in Perth, like, we're in such a bubble, but like, there's been so many different men who've been able to step into this work here in Perth, and it's awesome because there's an infinite
mm,
supply of different men. Whereas like, if it was just one or two people doing it, that would be like really confronting for like a business professional. It isn't going to go to someone who does like this real deep shamanic style stuff, or if it's
yeah.
like, so like, it's looking at like, there's going to be different people that are at different stages, which is going to be
Mm,
able to call in and attract with it. And like,
mm-hmm,
that's where we need to all just like work as one, like, and connect as a big community to be able to share and help
mm.
each other where we are.
Hmm. I'm curious to know what are your thoughts on men's work in the next 5 to 10 years. I'm really seeing, maybe because I'm also getting more and more into this, but I'm really seeing this. I wouldn't say mainstream, but one of the guys that I was speaking to said, I really see this becoming a lot more mainstream in the next 10 years or so. What are your
Mm.
thoughts on that?
Um, yeah, like definitely, like I see it's not going to slow down with how it's
Mm,
growing and stuff like that. Like, and it's one of the things, like it's such a necessity for people to be able to access this sort of work.
mm,
But like I always have a little bit of a worry with that as well. It's about like what's the level of expertise and skills of the facilitators as well, because
mm,
it's one of the big things. Because you can deal with you can like unlock some really heavy shit doing this work, and if you're not skilled and trained to do that, and if you don't have a good support network around you to help you with that, like that can like you can re-traumatize a lot of people with that. So it's one of the things that like I love that it's growing, and I love there's more people stepping into it, but I feel like there has to be a duty of care and working within where your limits and perimeters are of your own
mm,
knowledge and your skill set, and like making sure that you aren't trying to be the savior for everyone with that, because that's one of the things that like as it does get more mainstream, that's where like there's a chance of stuff like that happening, and like it nearly gets like watered down as well, where it's
mm.
like that's my biggest kind of like thing with like seeing how it expands in the future. Like
Yeah.
it's the one kind of like worry with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the word that actually pops up in my head as well. Something becomes bigger, obviously the quality, there's a tendency that the quality kind of plummets a little bit and gets watered down. Same thing with jiu-jitsu, to kind of make a
Yeah,
parallel. Everybody's kind of opening schools right now. Everybody's a black belt, but obviously there's a difference between a black belt and a black belt. So
yeah,
to use
yeah,
the same analogy, yeah, you really have to, especially if it's like a retreat thing, you really have to make sure that the facilitator is skilled, is experienced enough, really has this
mm,
sense of responsibility towards people, because yeah,
yeah,
hmm,
yeah.
yeah, that would
And
be
like
such a
it's
shame if something like this happens. I mean, I guess it's a natural
yeah,
thing, it's a natural tendency, but
yeah,
sorry, you're about
yeah.
to say something.
No, but like it's like yeah, like it's just a continuation of that. Like it's one of the things. Like it's amazing to see that there's so many men who want to and help, like because they have been helped with this sort of work. It's like they
Mm,
want to help other people.
mm,
But like it's just looking at it as like it's looking how to do that in a safe way for everyone involved. Um, but like it's the same as anything. Is like there's so many people like over the last couple of years who have been starting to like been called to do lots of different plant medicines and stuff like that as well. It's the exact same thing. It's like it's what's the sacredness of the containers that stuff is, because that can like open up so much stuff, like what's the aftercare, what's all of that stuff with it. Because I know for myself, like it's yeah, like it's something that's like I hold in such a high regard, is like having that authenticity and having that integrity of how you're able to support people and know where your limits are, and
mm,
knowing that there is that support if needed. Because yeah, like it's like I know for myself, like I've been in some really heavy spaces for myself, and you're like, oh, and I want to feel that I'm fully held as an in that. Whereas if I didn't
yeah,
feel like I was fully held, that could end up in like a whole heap of other stuff. Like
mm,
I work with like a counselor and stuff like that, who's one of my clients for like some more of like the body work and stuff like that I do, and like she ends up like a lot of clients that she sees are people who have done different aspects of work from untrained people, or different aspects of like plant medicines and stuff like that, and like end up having to spend like 8 months working with her to try to like heal from the trauma that they experienced from that thing that wasn't held in a safe space.
wow. Oof, dude. Especially when you get into plant medicine and using psychedelics, if you're really not sure what you're getting into, this could be very very heavy journey for some, right? So
Yeah,
yeah, I always kind of stay on a little bit on the side of caution and reason. Say, look, I
yeah.
even gave this as an example. My best friend did ayahuasca a few times, and he said, you know what, it changed my life, but I wouldn't recommend it to anybody.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
so much responsibility in something like this that you shouldn't take it like light-handed, you know?
yeah. And like a big one with this sort of stuff as well, like it's making sure that you're not substituting one thing with another. So like a lot of people, like as they're starting to starting on this healing path, like they start substituting as like if they were into like lots of heaviness and like lots of drugs and narcotics, all that sort of stuff, like, or they came from like really dark places where they had like addictive personalities to different things, or they were just in these really unhealthy relationships, however that might have looked for them. And then they are starting on this awoken path, and then they end up just jumping from like, got to go to a breathwork session, got to go to like this coach, got to do this immersion, got to do this ceremony, and like they're literally just jumping from one thing to the other, trying to find answers.
Yeah.
It's like one of the big things is like that I always like, it's like the answers are already within. It's like you go to these things that you feel that you're called to from that, really like, you know that this is right for you, but you're not going for that to fix you. You're going for that to clear away some of the noise so you can find the truth within yourself. But making sure that you're actually like giving yourself that time, that space to integrate and embody the lessons that came from that experience, rather than as soon as that's finished, jumping into the next thing.
That's a great point. Yeah, well, it can become a bit of a rabbit hole, and you almost become a little bit addicted to the next session, the next coaching experience, the next retreat, etc. And you kind of really need this to let it simmer a little bit, right? Because there's a lot of things that may come for you and maybe unpleasant. Let's use this label, net positive, negative, but it does come up for a reason, right? You need to kind of be a little bit self-aware and conscious of the fact that I may need to leave this and pause this for a little bit before diving in deeper.
And like, and that for myself, that comes from like my own personal experiences as well. Like it's like like I was like doing these things to try to find answers and try to find this healing and trying to do all of this stuff, and it wasn't until like a few years ago that like I had like a couple of big experiences where I was like, actually is like, this is where I need time and space to just allow this to play out and allow this to integrate into my day-to-day life, because like I'd have a big massive shift in a realization and like, oh, everything is going to be amazing now, and then a few months down the track you're back to where you were. And like it's one of the ways like I look at it is like we're constantly just going around in a circle where like we're in the shit, we find something that's going to help us, we do that, we have this big experience, everything's amazing, and then it's like, oh, something triggers us, and then we're back to where we left off a couple of months down the track. And like guaranteed, like, you know straight away a few people from that you have met on this path over the years, and like you meet them now and you're like, dude, you're still talking about the same issues that you were trying to deal with back 2 or 3 years ago. And like there's so many like that, because they're just constantly chasing that, and they're just trying to go from one thing to the other without actually like making the hard changes. And like that's where it's like making them more of the embodied changes, like looking what you're doing in your physical, looking what you're doing into your day-to-day stuff, to actually bring all of these lessons home, to start really working on, like, you could have this epiphany with why you act how you act, but if you don't change from that, you're going to just keep going back into that loop.
Dude, that's some high level things. I think for people that are listening right now to really take a second and really internalize what you're saying, because those are, you know, wise words. Obviously easier said than done, but there is so much truth to what you're saying. And I'm really hopeful that people don't just consume the content and okay, on to the next episode, and there is a tendency to do something like that.
Yeah, and that's it. Like, it's sitting with that, like, because like we're so blessed that there's so much information out there. There's so much learning. There's so much of all of this stuff. But again, it's like you need time to just process and bring it in. It's like, and that's what doing the work is to me. It's like I find myself, like, for me myself, is like I'm a facilitator. It's like I guide people to find what works for themselves and learn how to bring that into themselves. Like, I'm not going to fix you. I am going to guide you back to yourself and figure out how to fix yourself, how to heal yourself with what you do on a daily.
I think this is where people people kind of mix things up a little bit. They're kind of putting the faith in someone else, expecting that they have all the answers, whereas actually it's them doing the work, like you said, right? It's not someone's going to give you a magic pill, is going to say something, or you're going to go through. It does quick fixes like that. I'll be very wary of someone who actually preaches something like this.
Yeah, it's such an interesting one.
We can be talking, I think, without any preparation, probably like a couple of hours without any background or anything prepared. But I want to be respectful of your time as well. If people want to know a little bit more about you, obviously you're in Perth, you're doing in-person events there. Lucky enough to do that. Where can they go? How can they learn a little bit more about you?
Yeah, so for myself, like I'm pretty much mostly active on Facebook and Instagram. So on Facebook, I go under my name, Fin McKenna Fox. My personal profile is where I'm most active, and I've got like a private Facebook group for men called Grounding Your Masculine. So like it's just like an open group for men to come into to have support. I could do like monthly men's circles, virtual men's circles and stuff in that, as well as different trainings, and just like offer lots of support and stuff like that and community in there. And then I'm on Instagram, I go under the Grounded Masculine, so the score Grounded Masculine. And like that's where I'm basically most active through them two resources, and do online programs and stuff, group programs and stuff like that as well. So the next one of them will be kicking off early next year.
Nice. I think when you were about to say Instagram, the wind came up super strong. So I'll put it into the description. So we make sure that people actually follow you and kind of learn more about your work. Okay. Any final thoughts? Anything else that you want to add to I think an already awesome conversation?
Yeah. No, like I think that's it. Like the biggest one is just come back home. It's like one of the things that it says, like for like it's kind of like my slogan is like it's not men's work, it's soul work. So the more we can come back to ourselves, that's where it is. And like it's just like find your tribe, find your community.
Wow. All right, folks, there you have it. I don't think I can end on a better note than this. Fin, thank you very much. Also, thanks everybody for actually listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Keep winning.